Welcome to the Ryder Realty Podcast. Many times, buyers and sellers coming into the market don't know what to expect, have lots of questions, and don't know where to turn. That's where we come in. We want to be a resource to teach you the ins and outs of real estate to help you be more informed, more comfortable, and feel confident that you've picked the right realtor. So sit back and enjoy today's content. Okay, everybody, today on the Ryder Realty Podcast, we are going to talk about ideas for saving for a down payment. These are just some ideas that I have seen work for people over the years, over the 20 years here that I've sold, and I just have 5 of them here. And so I'm going to share these with you, and hopefully they can spark some ideas for you to help you as you budget for your house. So here's the first one. Number 1, have a written budget reflecting a mortgage payment, then save the difference. So a lot of people will come to me and they'll have an amount saved. Let's say $5,000, which is great. That's a great start. They have that money and their current rent is $800. And they are telling me that they're going to be comfortable in an $1,800 a month house payment. Well, the $800 that they're used to paying versus the $1,800 is obviously $1,000 difference. So they're approved for that. They feel good about that. They've done a budget, but when they've only saved $5,000, I'll say carefully or kind of gently go at this by saying, okay, so you've been saving $1,000 a month that to make up the difference between your rent now and what your house payment is. So you've been saving up for 5 months, right? To get to that 5,000. And not always, but usually or often, I should say, they will say, no, we are not saving $1,000 a month. We're saving $300 a month. So my concern, my point here is that if your rent is $800 and you're only saving $300 a month, that's all you feel like you can afford. That's not the same jump as $1,800 a month in a payment, which means that it could be a tight budget for you. So my suggestion is that you start saving the amount you need for what your rent is now or your living expenses is now to what you are comfortable in a mortgage, and save that for 6 months to make sure it's comfortable for you. That way you can kind of have that habit of making that phantom house payment each month. And so that budget amount that is your predicted house payment or comfortable house payment is in your budget as a line item. So instead of it saying, rent $800, it might say house payment $1,800 to kind of get used to that. Yes, you can say that you are going to make cuts, and that's what a lot of people do. They'll say, well, we eat out a lot, or we buy coffee every day that we don't need to, or maybe we buy steaks instead of hot dogs. We find ways we can cut, which is great. The problem can be that if you're not disciplined, you're going to feel like you're suffering by giving those things up, and you're not going to be living in a dream house. It's going to be a nightmare house when you want to, go out to eat on your favorite restaurant on a Friday night and you can't because you need to make a house payment. And maybe you have more discipline than I do. That could be very much the case. But I could say I'm going to cut my eating out budget, but I know I'm not going to because I enjoy eating out. And we have a very busy life with careers and 4 kids, 3 still at home. And so that might seem like a great idea to me to cut that out, but I know in my heart that's going to be a big struggle and something I don't want to give up. I don't want to give that up just to have a bigger, nicer, newer house. So some people are disciplined to do it and be happy. Some people are disciplined to do it just because they're a disciplined person, but they're not going to like it because they're going to want to, go out to eat or not give up that toy or whatever the case might be. And other people are going to think they can do it, but just not be able to. And that would be where I fall. So by practicing that for, 4, 5, 6 months of making that difference in payment, that is also a great way to save up for your down payment. It also gives you the practice of having that in your budget, and it helps you know if that is worth that house payment amount or if it's not worth giving up whatever you have to give up to do it. But how it, again, because I feel like I went off on a huge tangent there, how it helps you with your down payment is it gives you that discipline of saving each month, the current rent or whatever your monthly payment is to the new. It will get you used to doing that. And then obviously that difference is being saved towards your down payment. So that's idea number one. We're going to do a separate podcast with more budgeting tips. So I'm going to stop with that part because it sounds like kind of more, I don't want this to go towards budgeting. I want it to be actually a saving idea. So hold those thoughts. We'll discuss them in our next episode. But I did want to say that that is a very good, easy way to save that will also help you be on track and feel comfortable with your house payment. Okay. Number two, open a dedicated savings account, and it should be a free savings account with no minimums. There's no sense in you paying fees and having minimums when it's just putting money into the bank each month for your house or your down payment. And what I would actually have you do is if you're at a bank that you can like nickname your account or whatever, I would give it a nickname simply of house. So you know that anything in that account is going for your house. And it might start out super small. That's why the minimums can be an issue. So I would just find a free checking account, free savings account that has no minimums and start putting in money into it. And like I said, if you can call it house, that is great. It's less tempting to spend that money if it's in a separate account versus your regular account or even your checking account. Because if it's in regular savings, it could be spent on something like a car breaks down or whatever, or some other thing that comes up. If it's under that house savings, especially if it's named house, you're gonna see that grow, which will get you excited about that house and down payment. And it's also really a good way to keep it separate. So that is what I would suggest, and then just watch it grow. And I think it'll be exciting to watch it grow because it feels like whatever you're giving up to save up that money or just the sake of time, the time it takes to save up that money, it's going to feel rewarding because you're watching it grow. And that would be tip number two. Tip number three is to get a side hustle. And I've seen clients get second jobs. I've seen them start small businesses in order to get money for down payment, whether that be a physical item they're selling or maybe a babysitting service or a cleaning service, or getting a job, at a restaurant or whatever that looks like. Now, in these cases, when they were doing this, there was an end in sight. They were only doing it to save money to buy a house and expedite that process. In other words, they weren't using that money and putting it into their regular household budget because that was not the purpose. The purpose was to save money towards a house. So they knew they were going to be able to quit when they were able to get that dollar amount earned. Why do I say that? For two reasons. Number one, you don't want to spend your whole life working two jobs if you don't need to save to have your house. So because they knew there was an end in sight, they could make some sacrifices they needed to, maybe miss out on some things at home or whatever that looked like because there was an end in sight. The other thing is because they were only doing it to save up for a house and all of that money was going into that house savings, they weren't adding it to their monthly family budget, meaning their job they got that was supposed to be 6 months while they saved for a house, they weren't adding that money to their checking account and then it ended up becoming a car payment. Does that make sense? Because then they're really getting stuck in that side hustle because they've now increased their debt to have whatever XYZ they used for their money. And so now that job, there is no end in sight because they've added to the budget. But by just having that side hustle focus on the house, they have an end in sight. They know what it's for. It makes it easier to go into a second job after, a long day at a first job. And I've seen that work very well for people for the season that they needed it for. Now, if you start a side hustle and you're doing childcare or you make this product that you love and you want to sell, I mean, that's a whole different situation. Of course, maybe that becomes your full-time job. But in general, what I've seen with my clients, that was not the purpose or what they were doing. It was simply a side job, side hustle they could do to make money for the house. So that is tip number three. Tip number four, sell things. Some people, when they're moving, they want to get rid of stuff anyway, especially if it's like moving from one home they own to a different home. They have stuff they want to get rid of, stuff that they weren't planning on taking to the new house, maybe because it's been in a box that hasn't been open for 5 years, or they're just going to do something different because those curtains, that couch, whatever, doesn't fit into the new house. So, selling things when you're getting ready to move to help you with your down payment could be a really good win-win for yourself. It could be typical yard sale items like household items. So think dishes, decorative items, even clothes or anything else you want to get rid of that would be of value to somebody else. 10 years ago, I would have said that people do this more at yard sales. But I would say now I see a lot of clients post things on their personal Facebook page or some kind of group like that allows them to sell it and not be stuck on a weekend hoping for nice weather for a yard sale. It isn't just small household items, though, that people can sell. It can also be big items. And sometimes those big items are hard to sell on an emotional level. It's much easier to sell a couch than it is to sell your favorite lawnmower that you have that has all kinds of awesome features. I remember several years ago, some clients told me about a friend of theirs who wanted to buy a house but couldn't get qualified because he had a $900 truck payment. Now, to this day, I wonder how in the world he could have a payment that high. This was not a work truck, so it didn't have the fancy bells and whistles or dump truck style that you would need for a job or a business. It was a pleasure truck, a single guy who worked hard and wanted to have a nice truck with all of the bells and whistles and the four-wheel drive and all the things. And he was not willing to give that up or sell it to buy a house, even though he knew that he was not able to get approved because of it, which is completely fine. I would never want anyone to give up something like that and regret it later. And with this guy, working hard, long hours, being in his, I think, late 20s, not having a spouse, not having kids, for him to have given up what was the most important thing to him at that particular point would just be something he would regret later. So to to give something up that you want more than a house is not a good idea. You want to be happy about the house, but that could be an option if it's okay with you to part with, which would be a big ticket item that you're selling to give you down payment money or even to change your debt to income point. But this is more looking at it at the down payment spot, not the budgeting spot or the amount of getting approved. So, if you do decide to sell something drastic like a vehicle, a boat, motorcycle, a zero turn mower, or whatever else that might be, that would be that, bigger type item, and you're buying a house with someone, make sure that both of you are on board. There are no regrets, no fights, and you can both enjoy the home that you're. And the last tip that I am going to give you is to use your tax refund towards a down payment. Now, we are self-employed, and as long as I've sold real estate, even though for the time when I started selling 20 years ago, we had one kid, we ended up having three more, so four total. We haven't gotten a tax return in a long time because of being self-employed. So this may not apply to you, but if it does and you get a tax return, I have seen people use that to go towards their down payment. The first time I saw this, the first time I saw this done, I was a little weirded out because they were waiting for their tax return to come buy a house because they had zero money in the bank, like zero, zero. So they weren't using it to supplement or add to their down payment. They were using it for their down payment. It wasn't a bad idea. In fact, many people will use their tax return kind of as a savings account. So when it comes in, they might pay off some debt, they might do a home remodeling project, etc. But what weirded me out with this family is that they had no money in the bank and had no plan to save any money except through that tax return. And they had, goodness, I think three or four kids. I remember she was pregnant during this time. And this was maybe the fall. And they said they're going to get their tax return by the end of January, first part of first part of February, and they were going to buy a house with that. And that is what they ended up doing. The concern I would have, though, is if a family emergency would come up after their home was purchased, they would need a new furnace or anything that could happen in life, they would have zero way to pay for it until the following tax return time, which could be scary. So, my caution is to be careful or mindful of using your tax return as the only source for your down payment, but to add it to your down payment with a tax return is a great idea. And in case you're wondering, in the time that I first met them and they were waiting those months until they got their tax return, I actually did not sell them a house. They got connected with another realtor, and I knew they saw a house because I saw the transfer. But I don't know their story beyond that to know if they did have a financial struggle or if they were able to hopefully figure out a way to keep making money to have that cushion in case something would go wrong. So those are my tips for saving for a down payment. And I hope they help you. I'm sure there are many more tips that you could even give me. These are just some that I've seen over the years and how people have made them work for them. And so I wanted to pass them on to you guys as ideas that could help you if that's where you're at. And then we are going to talk about budgeting tips next week that could be helpful for you guys as you're saving to buy a house and then as you're buying the house. And I hope you have a great day. That's it for today. Thanks for listening. If there's anything we can help you with, please reach out. All of our contact information is on the show notes. Have a blessed day.